Welcome everybody to our weekly community conversation series. We're thrilled to have you with us today as we continue these conversations through the summer, though it hardly seems that we've moved beyond the situation that we were in when we started this thing many months ago. As we were talking just before this, before some of you joined, it seems the stressors just keep adding as we move forward with navigating the pandemic and all of its associated situations that it is creating for many of us. But we're glad to have you here for this important conversation in our Stress and Collective Trauma series on stress management, empowerment, self-care, and the ongoing challenges and strategies for how to deal with them. Before we jump into that, just a few words, and I think Penny will move to the next slide there. Well, I will go ahead and introduce her before we get going, but back with us today is the amazing and remarkable Dr. Leonard Cordis. She is an associate professor, area head, and director of clinical training in the Department of Psychology here at the University at Albany. Her partner in crime, Alex Ptsd, who is in the Department of Counseling and Psychology, is unable to join us today to be part of the conversation, but we remain in excellent and wonderful hands with Dr. Gordis, and I know we're going to have just an amazing hour together as we navigate mental health and dealing with all the stressors associated with what we're all dealing with now, normal and otherwise. A couple of words just about sort of how we got to this point. For those who have joined us before, this is part of our remote ed series that we kicked off a website toward the beginning of the pandemic to provide resources for parents and teachers, school children, and so forth to navigate this space. And there are over 1,000 curated resources by grade level and subject matter on the remoteed.org website. I encourage you to check those out. Also, the Capital Region BOCES created a essential ed website for our teachers in the audience. There are a standard-based curriculum there for taking classrooms remote and still meeting the New York State standards, and so a great resource for additional curriculum development, essential ed. Next slide. This summer we have a number of these community conversations moving forward. Of course, today we're dealing with mental health and stress. Also coming up in August, we will have another series on our Leading in Times of Change, which is a collaborative effort with the Capital Region BOCES, looking at the ways in which we are leading our schools and colleges through this age of the pandemic. And of course, we'll be back with you on August 19th with the continuation of our mental health and stress series with Dr. Gordis and Dr. Ptsd. Also to note, this week actually, it's a little bit too late to join, but we had our Young Writers workshops going on right now for the youth in the community to continue to navigate and improve their writing skills. But we do have a series of virtual STEM summer camps that are underway throughout the entire summer. And so if you're interested in looking at those STEM summer camps being taught by New York State master teachers, very reasonably priced, really to try to reduce the summer slide of learning, and encourage you to check those out on the Remote ED website as well. Next slide. We also have upcoming this summer the second annual School Safety Summit, or officially called the Safe, Prepared, and Effective Learning Environments. This year it will be virtual in nature. It will be over 3 days, July 23rd, August 6th, and August 13th. We encourage you to join us for this important conversation, which is a collaboration between the School of Education, the College of Emergency Preparedness, Homeland Security, and Cybersecurity. It's also being sponsored by NARIC, which is the Northeastern Regional Information Center as part of the Capital Region BOCES. It's a great opportunity for community leaders, educators, first responders, mental health professionals, parents, guardians, social workers to come together to learn about how we are preparing and creating more safe learning environments for our children. And this year we will be taking a very focused look at the ways in which COVID is affecting safety and security in our schools. And so invite you to join us for those as well. Next slide. Great, and that brings us to our main presentation today, which I've already provided an introduction for, but we're delighted to have Dr. Leonard Cordis back in this very, very important topic, and I know it's going to be a great hour. So, Dr. Gordis, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. If we could move to the next slide. I want to thank everyone for coming today. I think consistent with the previous sessions that we've done, it's really important to acknowledge when we're doing things for our well-being and when we're taking care of ourselves. It's when we're dealing with so much stress, it leads to a need to be intentional about self-care. And this is a theme that will come up. So I do want to take the time to thank you all for coming. Next slide. So I assume that some people have been here for the previous two sessions that Alex and I have done, and some people may not have. So I just want to, regardless, even if you've been here, just do a little bit of a recap of some of the things that we talked about that are important. This continues to be a really difficult time. As Jason was saying, their stressors keep coming, right? Like, some of the things have changed. Maybe our infection rates locally are a little bit lower, but there's all sorts of new ways that the pandemic is affecting us and creating uncertainty and stress that now we're going to be faced with in the next month, especially in a school of education, people who are associated with education, teachers, people who work in schools. It's a really stressful time. I don't have to tell you, thinking about what's going to happen. How safe is it going to be? What's going to happen with our own kids? So we've been living with this pandemic for a while, and that has accumulated. All the things that were stressful about it before are still there. And now there's new things that are filling our lives with uncertainty. We still have social distancing that affects how we can relate to each other and get support from each other. Our routines are still disrupted. There's uncertainty about what will happen with infection rates. So this is still a difficult time. And that may seem trivial to say, but I think when we're talking about stressful times, just acknowledging the difficulty of the situation is a really important first step. I know I work with people, I supervise students doing clinical work. I do clinical work myself. And I just have friends who I talk with a lot too. And it's easy to be very stressed out and irritable and upset and forget that, oh yes, we're in the context of something that's very stressful and it's having an impact on us. And that's what leads us to need to be intentional with our self-care, our acknowledgement of the situation we're in, and take steps to help deal with our mood and anxiety and interpersonal relationships so that we can function better. So over the course of this series, we've been talking about different strategies to help with stress management and lifting our mood. And that's important because it also leads us to be able to interact better with people in our lives. And so in a cyclical way, in an iterative way, if we can manage our own stress, we will relate in a more constructive and positive way with people around us. That will also allow us to connect in a positive way and gain social support and give social support. And so that will also help us with stress. So these things really feed on each other, which is why I think they're so important. If you remember last time, or if you weren't here last time, I can review. One of the things that happens when we get stressed is our sympathetic nervous system gets activated. That's that fight or flight response. Across species, when our sympathetic nervous systems are activated, we are less empathic, we are less affiliative socially, we're less gentle, we're less kind. That makes sense. If a lion is chasing you, you need to get away from it or you need to fight it. But we're not usually being chased by lions. And so that is not very helpful when we're trying to interact with people in our lives. And especially when we've been cooped up with people in our lives and none of us has outlets or ways, our regular ways to cope. There's a lot of stress, and so it can lead to friction. And so finding ways to reduce that stress and interact in a more positive way is really important. So it's both about stress management and will help our interpersonal relationships. So last time we met, we talked about paced breathing as one strategy, like a very kind of purely almost like physiological way to reduce our sympathetic nervous system activation and increase our parasympathetic nervous system activation, which is that rest or digest part of the autonomic nervous system, which is associated with more prosocial behavior, emotion regulation. So we're going to continue talking today about some other strategies that help with reducing sympathetic nervous system activity and helping with a more positive stress profile. So And I mentioned relaxation, progressive muscle relaxation last time, and we didn't get to it. So I'm going to work, kind of go through progressive muscle relaxation for everyone today. So hopefully that'll be something people like. I know when I've done this in my abnormal psychology classes, the students really enjoy it. I know when I was trained to do it in graduate school and we were all relaxed, we all really enjoyed it. It's just an enjoyable process. So I'll say a little bit more about that. In addition to these more like relaxation, physiological oriented strategies, our thinking really affects our behavior and our feelings, and also our stress level affects our thinking. So all these things are related: how we think about things, what we do, and how we feel. So we'll also talk about ways to get our thinking in a more positive direction. And we'll talk about mindfulness and do some cognitive mindfulness related activities that will help with that. And finally, we'll talk about behavior activation, which is a way to feel better through doing things that you enjoy. And I know people have made suggestions about this in previous sessions, so I want to review some of that too. Next slide, please. Okay, so as Jason noted, Alex isn't here today. And one of the ways we had envisioned this series is thinking about both our self-care and then empowerment in terms of community engagement with things that are going on in the world right now that are being more and more clarified as needing addressing. And I'm still a learner in that. I really look to Alex for guidance on that. And so I definitely noticed his absence today, and he couldn't be here. So I understand that, but I want to be clear that that's something that we're missing today. And it made me think about how to frame what our topic today. And one of the things I've always felt as a clinical psychologist, and even back doing community work as a rape crisis counselor, back when I was in college, which is how I got into all this, is that we want to help people feel better, but we also don't want to feel okay about an unjust world. And so I feel a tension there. And so I'm interested in people's thoughts about that. And also, one of the things that I think about is how if we take care of ourselves and we learn to engage intentionally and in a constructive way with the world, we'll be able then to make a positive impact on things that are important to us in the world, both at a personal level and on a more collective level. So for me, that's how I frame this. And I will also look forward to Alex being back with us at our next session. Next slide, please. So just, this is a little bit redundant to what I just said, but when we care for ourselves, we can engage more constructively with others. And that allows us to work together and do more productive things, and also can be uplifting. And I think recent events have clarified, even though these things have been, they're not new injustices, but they've really become much more clarified to many of us, that there's an urgency to address them. And so we shouldn't be comfortable with being relaxed about that. But if we take care of ourselves, we'll be able to make more of an impact. And so the things that we'll talk about today involve management of stress, and also our strategies that are known to improve mood. So those things relate, and that probably resonates with a lot of people, I'm guessing, that mood and stress are very connected. Next slide, please. Okay, so as promised last time, the first strategy I want to talk about is called progressive muscle relaxation. And this may be familiar to some people. It's a really great strategy. It's been around for over 50 years in the behavioral therapy world. And there's a lot of data saying that PMR can improve mood, it can help with pain management, it helps with overall health, it helps with certain physical conditions. And the basic idea with progressive muscle relaxation is that you tense and relax various muscle groups. And there are a lot of variations on this. There's actually PMR scripts for kids that are very metaphoric. So, imagining, like you'll notice I'll tell you to squeeze your fists, but when you're working with kids, you can say, pretend you're squeezing a lemon, which is funny. I don't know how often kids squeeze lemons, but it's a visual that works for kids. So you tense and relax major muscle groups. You kind of breathe slowly. You can include visualization. If I were doing this in session with a client, I might work on developing for that client a scene that makes them feel very relaxed. It's going to be different for different people. And kind of start with a visualization and then start the PMR. And we know this improves mood and reduces stress. So I was hoping we could spend a little bit of time doing a brief progressive muscle relaxation. So I'm gonna pull mine up and I'm gonna go through this with you, and you can feel free, if you're interested, to follow along and take part in this. So I'll say also that if anything that I say to do is uncomfortable or makes you feel any pain anywhere, don't do that. If you have back problems and we're talking about tensing muscles in your stomach and back, you can skip that. Do whatever is good for you. Be comfortable. This is no pressure. It's meant to be a positive experience. Okay, so here we go. So to get started, find a comfortable, relaxed position. You may want to close your eyes, or feel free to keep them open if you're more comfortable that way. Let's start by focusing on your breathing, following your breath as it comes into your body and goes out of your body. Take 3 slow, full, natural breaths in and out, noticing how your energy rises on the in-breath and falls on the out-breath. Slow, even breaths can help our bodies begin to relax as we start to notice the difference between tension and relaxation. Now focus on your feet, continuing to breathe evenly and naturally. Tighten the muscles in your feet by clenching your toes and pulling the tops of your feet up towards your shins. Hold the tension, keep holding it, and now release and relax, noticing how different your feet feel between the tension and the calm relaxation. Next, focus on your lower legs. Tighten those muscles in your calves tight and tense and hold it. And then release and relax, allowing the tension to drain away and melt into the ground. Notice the experience of peaceful relaxation in your calves. Continue to breathe naturally and easily as you pay attention to the relaxation in your calves. Now bring your awareness to your upper legs. Tense and tighten the muscles in your thighs. Hold them really tight. Hold it, tense. And then release and relax, letting any tightness and discomfort or stress flow away while continuing to notice the difference between tension and tranquility. Stay with that experience, noticing that relaxation while you continue to breathe easily and calmly. Now, let's move your awareness to your stomach and back. Tighten those muscles by pulling your belly button as far as you can toward your back. Tight, tense, hold it, and then release and relax, making plenty of space in your abdomen for your breath, noticing how it feels to allow your muscles to be still. Your breathing is nice and slow and easy. Now, bring your attention to your hands. Tighten your fingers into a tense, tight fist, squeezing as tight as you can. Squeeze really tight. And then release and relax. Let any tension or discomfort flow out through your fingertips. Take time for the experience as the tension melts away, replaced by a feeling of calm, peaceful relaxation. Now focus on your arms. Tighten all of those muscles, pulling your arms in as tight as you can into your body. Tight, really tight and tense, and hold it. Now release and relax. Allow your arms to settle down, noticing the difference between the stress and the stillness. Take the time to breathe into this experience. Now move on to your shoulders and your neck. Go ahead and lift your shoulders up and in, really pulling them into your neck, and hold them tight, tensing them really tight. And then release and relax, letting your shoulders fall gently down, letting go of any stress and allowing the muscles in your neck and shoulders to be free from tension. Now, gently focus your attention on all the tiny little muscles of your face. Really scrunch it, tighten the muscles up, shut your eyes really tightly, clench your jaw, stretch your lips up and back, and hold that tension really tight. And then release and relax, letting your muscles be settled and comfortable, paying attention to the difference between the tightness of the tension and the comfort of the relaxation. Now imagine looking over your whole body to see if there are any remaining areas of tension or discomfort. Gently breathe into those areas, imagining oxygen is going directly to any areas of tension. So enjoy this for a few more minutes of relaxation. Allow your body to continue to feel comfortable and relaxed. And even as your attention turns elsewhere, you can stay as relaxed as you can. And when you're ready, take one more full breath and gently bring your attention back to the world around you. And you can open your eyes when you're ready or not. And come back to bring your attention to the presentation. So I realize I don't have you telling me if that was a positive experience. Feel free to chat that in if what your reactions to that were, but hopefully that was something that made a difference in terms of your feelings of stress. One thing I would say is I was doing a somewhat abbreviated version of it today, but one thing I really like to do is actually do each muscle group twice. And the second time I do it, I would say tighten it even more and relax even more. And I think that it takes a little longer, but it can be really nice, really add to the feeling of relaxation. There are resources at the end of the talk listed, and I think I posted them before. There's some great versions of this online. There's some recordings. I actually have a recording under the YouTube Gordis Relaxation, it's been up there for a while. There's no visual, but because I refer so many people that I work with to it, that it's nice for them to be able to do it, I think, too. So feel free to look at that. And there's also other ones. So this is tried and true strategy in the behavior therapy literature, and I'm glad that some people found it useful. So there's a lot of research behind it. So that's one great thing that you can do. It's a little impractical when you're like at work, you can't necessarily lie down or go through that. But if you're at home or you're stressing out or you're trying to sleep, it can really be helpful in calming you down. Also, I will say that for some people, it takes some time to get used to it. It can feel a little weird. So we think of it as a skill to learn. So PMR, it's a great thing. Next, another strategy that also can have some of the same impacts on mood and stress is mindfulness. And in general, when we talk about mindfulness, does PMR help with headaches? Yes, I believe there are some data supporting PMR helping with headaches, but I would want to double check that before I bet my life on it. That's a good question. Because there's a lot, like for migraine, we don't have a lot of information on what causes migraine, but stress management and seems to help with that. And PMR, I think, is one thing that people use in treating migraine. Okay, so mindfulness is bringing your awareness to the present moment in an open-minded, non-judgmental way with curiosity about your experience. And there's a lot of different types of mindfulness. There are body scans where you're paying attention to all the different sensations of your physiological experience. There's mindfulness about one's thoughts, and that's kind of where we're going to go in a little bit, where we're going to do a cognitive diffusion exercise from acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. But there's a lot of different mindfulness protocols, and one great resource for that is the Mindful Awareness Research Center at UCLA. They have a ton of free mindfulness protocols, both recorded and transcribed, on their website. And there's a lot of other ones too, but that's a great place to go to get started with mindfulness and meditation. I believe I have the link at the end of the talk for that too. So I instead of doing like a straight body scan mindfulness, I wanted to get to some of the more cognitive challenges that we deal with when we're really stressed out, and a mindfulness related exercise that ties into that. So if I could have the next slide. Okay, so there's a lot of ways that we think about things when we're very stressed out or very sad or depressed that are unhelpful. And you may recognize some of these things that you might do. I certainly know that I recognize myself in some of these. So I just put a few examples. There's a lot of different ways that we categorize these, and there's a lot of overlap. But for example, catastrophizing or catastrophic thinking, you go from A to Z really quickly to the worst possible thing. So I know, like, here's an example from my own life. I have a daughter who dives, she's a diver, and her shoulder was bothering her. And I quickly went to the fact that she needed surgery. Like, it probably took me about 30 seconds to the idea that she was going to need surgery for her shoulder. She didn't need surgery for her shoulder. If she had, we would have managed that. But in my mind, I went really quickly. And I think when we're dealing with the ambiguous situation of this pandemic and a lot of things that are going on in our society, the substrates for catastrophic thinking are all around us. And so one way to deal with catastrophic thinking is to slow down our thinking and remind ourselves what's most likely. Often there is something terrible that could happen, but there's a lot of more likely things that will happen that are much less catastrophic. My husband says to me, we're not going to go 3 what ifs down. We don't talk about 3 what ifs down the line, right? So if you notice yourself being very stressed out, ask yourself if you're catastrophizing, if you're doing catastrophic thinking. Jumping to conclusions is kind of like that. A mental filter is when you really just see the negatives and you don't see the positives in something. Emotional reasoning is when you feel something so you assume it has to be so. And shoulding and musting, we say like shitting on ourselves. There's a lot of little catchphrases about this. Albert Ellis called it masturbation. But these are things that we decide that something must or should happen, or we must or should do something, or else we're terrible, we're bad, or something terrible is going to happen. So those kinds of thinking tend to go along with feeling not good, feeling stressed out, feeling anxious, feeling sad, because often things don't work out the way we want, and we actually can manage them. But when we think about things like this, it doesn't help us do that. So, and often when we do these things, we're doing them really quickly. And we may be ruminating about the past and how terrible things have been, or we may be obsessing with worry about the future. And, you know, people might say, oh, just stop thinking like that, or don't think about that. But it's hard to do that, right? How do you just stop thinking obsessively anxious thoughts? It's not easy. So having some strategies to deal with our thoughts in a different way can be a really useful way to manage stress and feel better. And so that's where I want to talk about the next. I'll just say one other thing about this is these kinds of unhelpful thinking patterns often also affect our relationships, right? If we filter out positive things and only see the negative, it's going to affect how we view our partners, for example, our spouses or our loved ones. It may make us more negatively reactive. So these are really important for our interpersonal functioning as well. So next slide, please. Okay. So actually, I don't have a slide for what I want to do next. So you can go back to the other slide, actually, I'm sorry. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is called a cognitive diffusion exercise, and we refer to it as the leaves on a stream exercise. And the idea here is that we get very attached to our thoughts, right? Like, these thought patterns are difficult, but we get very hooked in by them. We think that if I think it, it must be true. And instead of thinking, oh, that's a thought I'm having. So on the one hand, we may be able to challenge our thoughts and say, oh no, that thing is not so likely to happen. But we still may have these thoughts that we can't really argue with, and they just go and go in our head. And what we want to do is turn the volume down on them and maybe detach a little bit from them and say, huh, that's an interesting thought that I'm having. I'm gonna I'm having that thought. That's interesting. That doesn't mean I have to feel or do anything in particular. It's just a thought. We really emphasize our thoughts, but if we can disentangle ourselves from our thoughts, we'll feel a lot better. So this exercise is called Leaves on a Stream. And the idea here is to have a strategy for not being so tangled up in our thoughts, and having our thoughts just be part of our experience that we can look at with curiosity and non-judgmentalness and just let them go. Okay, so you ready? All right. Everyone's muted, so I don't know. Okay, so this is by Harris in 2009. So I want you to sit in a comfortable position and either close your eyes or rest them gently on a fixed spot in the room. Visualize yourself sitting beside a gently flowing stream with leaves floating along the surface of the water. Now for the next few minutes, I want you to take each thought that enters your mind and place it on a leaf. Just let it float by. Do this with each thought, pleasurable, painful, or neutral. Even if you have joyous or enthusiastic thoughts, place them on a leaf and let them float by. If your thoughts momentarily stop, continue to watch the stream. Sooner or later, your thoughts will start up again. Allow the stream to flow at its own pace. Don't try to speed it up and rush your thoughts along. You're not trying to rush the leaves along or get rid of your thoughts. You're allowing them to come and go at their own pace. If your mind says, "This is dumb, I'm bored, I'm not doing this right," place those thoughts on leaves too and let them pass. If a leaf gets stuck, allow it to hang around until it's ready to float by. If the thought comes up again, just watch it float by another time. If a difficult or painful feeling arises, simply acknowledge it. Say to yourself, "I notice myself having a feeling of boredom or of impatience or frustration." Place those thoughts on leaves and allow them to float along. From time to time, your thoughts may hook you and distract you from being fully present in this exercise. This is normal. As soon as you realize that you've become sidetracked, gently bring your attention back to the visualization exercise. Okay, so that's an example of cognitive diffusion, a way to disentangle ourselves from our thoughts. And there's variations on this too. Another way I've used this in working with people is people who have recurring thoughts of being, anxious thoughts or self-critical thoughts. They visualize a parade walking by and people carrying signs on them, and the signs have whatever their thoughts are, and they just watch it go by. And the idea is that we don't have to be hooked in by our thoughts. The challenge is we might want to follow the thoughts. They drag us along, and the idea is to let them go. So hopefully that was interesting for people to do also. Let's see. Let's see. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so we talked about like physical things we can do to help us, like our physiology, calm down. We talked about some cognitive strategies. And then the last one, which seems really simple, but is not always easy, is called behavior activation. And that behavior activation is also a great, really well-supported treatment for depression in the behavior therapy literature. And the idea here, it sounds really simple, but doing things can help us feel better. So doing things we enjoy, doing things that keep us busy, doing things that help other people, these tend to lift our spirits. And It sounds simple. And the thing is that when you're depressed, you don't necessarily believe that anything can make you feel better. And so when we're working with people clinically, we get people to actually complete a log of their behaviors and their moods, so we can see like if there's anything that they're doing that lifts their moods a little bit, and we can help them increase those things and work with them to schedule positive activities in their calendar. I think this is actually really important given the context of our series here, because another thing that is really useful when you're trying to feel better and engage positively with the world is to do things that are consistent with your values. I think next slide. So, right, one of the things that we do when we're doing behavior activation work with people is we help identify what people's values are. And when you do things that are consistent with your values, you tend to feel better. And I think now we're all in a situation where we're seeing the world in need of repair and trying to find what we're gonna do. I mean, it can lead us to despair to see how terrible things are and how people are suffering, and want to make things better out of necessity and a sense of urgency, out of a sense of obligation, a sense of needing to contribute. And so if we can take care of ourselves, if we can take care of ourselves and manage our stress, interact positively with each other, and you know how when you're flying on an airplane and they say, you know, if the oxygen mask comes down, put your own oxygen mask on before you put your child's oxygen mask on. So if we put our own oxygen masks on, we'll be more effective and constructive in working with others, connecting with others, and doing activism. So I kind of made that all caps to remind us if there's activism that we want to do, things we want to do to make the world better, that we can be more effective doing that. And that also should be constructive for us and for the world. Next slide. So just to sum up, stress management enhances our ability to communicate and interact effectively, and it serves us well in how we think and act towards ourselves and others. And I think these strategies can help us also be helpful to the world. So, and at this point, I want to open it up to questions or thoughts people are having about how other strategies or things they can apply that are related to what we've talked about, or strategies that work for people to get through this difficult time, and what people are thinking about. And you can chat, or I guess you can also talk if you can. I think there's space for people to be able to talk as well. So any thoughts or comments? Maybe people are sleeping from the PMR. Dina?
Hi. One of the things I was actually listening to a Chronicle of Higher Education webinar this afternoon, dealing with administrative responses to COVID and opening of campuses, and a lot of confusion and a lot of questions. And one of the things that one of the panelists had said really kind of struck a chord with me, and it related to some of the things you were asking at the beginning of your conversation, which was, how do we let things go that are important? How we're not supposed to necessarily move on from things that we should be dealing with, or try to negate that negative feeling in our mind when we really should be responding to it. And what the person said was, we have to learn how to be okay with not being okay. Like allowing ourselves to not be okay with something, and allowing ourselves to understand that there's a reason why we're not okay, and it's a legitimate reason. And even if people around us are saying, oh, don't worry about that, or don't be concerned about that, or we'll take care of it, it'll be okay. To know within yourself that sometimes it's okay not to be okay with it, and you have to actually do something to deal with your concern or deal with your stress or deal with your anxiety. You can't just be okay with it and let it sit there. But you have to understand that there's nothing wrong with you if you're stressed, or there's nothing wrong with you if you're the only one that is concerned about something. That's your concern, that's legitimate, and you have to work through it.
Yes, thank you very much for that comment. That was so nicely expressed in a way that I can relate to. And I relate to that on a bunch of levels, because it's very hard to be okay now, period, because of the stress that's going on, and we're kind of getting through. But also when we see injustices that are so disheartening, or we experience them. I mean, we see or experience because we're all in different places relative to the issues. I wouldn't want to neutralize the discomfort with that, you know. And actually, when I was in college, I worked as a rape crisis counselor, and I had these conversations with someone I knew saying, you can't try to ameliorate the effects of sexual assault, because that just makes it okay for sexual assault to exist. What you're doing is facilitating and enabling a rape culture. And that tension between helping people who are suffering versus allowing a status quo to continue is one that I think about a lot. And I think that your comments resonate with me in that respect. And I don't have great answers. My answer is function as well as we can, but continue to work. And I think, like, it's interesting, like both Alex and I both are directors of training in the clinical psychology program and the counseling psychology program, respectively. And those students now have been meeting to get involved in working on issues of inclusion and justice. And the programs now, the students have started networking with each other. And so I think that gives me hope that we can work on self-care, and then also work at least to make our field respond proactively. But there's clearly a lot of work to do, and I wouldn't want to be comfortable with that. I see there's a question about whether these techniques help with PTSD, and yes, they can. I mean, PTSD expresses itself in different ways, but treatments for PTSD, some of the treatments deal with trying to decrease the acute anxious reaction to reminders and triggers associated with the trauma, but also try to address problems in thinking that arise based on the effects of the trauma. You know, ways that people try to incorporate how a trauma affects a person. So a sense of like the world being changed, the world being unsafe, needing a sense of control in order to function. And so really working with people to look at how their thinking was affected by the trauma, and help address thinking in a way that the person can move forward productively. And I think, you know, the issue with PMR, the progressive muscle relaxation, is there's some people have issues with control, like they feel really uncomfortable just relaxing because they're very stressed out, and that kind of loss of control can be challenging. But if they're able to do it, it can be great to help people, because, you know, it can help with sleep, it can help with mood, and all those things go along with PTSD. With PTSD, there's not like one medication that helps, or, you know, it's not like often on different kinds of medications to help with mood and anxiety, and there's different kinds of psychotherapy. So it's a pretty complicated disorder. So yes, the short answer is yes, but I gave you a longer one because I do that. Any other thoughts or questions? Strategies that people are using for managing the stress? I learned a lot from people last week when people were sharing things that they did that are helping them, because I just mentioned a few things, and I'm always looking to pick up new ideas.
I actually did have a question, if I may. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the difference between, relaxation techniques within a shared environment.
Mm.
So, like the when you were walking us through and through and we were listening to you and we were kind of engaged in that way versus trying to do this on your own. And is it as effective, or are there things that we can do when we're alone that would help in the same way that having someone else walk us through the technique?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, I mean, I think that it can be easier to do this when you're alone. I mean, it helps to have someone giving you the instructions aloud, which is why I think, like that's why I put one on, it's on YouTube for my own clients, because some people find it a little harder. I mean, you're all in your own spaces, so you're not in a room with other people. I think people can be a little inhibited. You can feel a little bit uncomfortable when you're like in the room with a therapist and doing the PMR. But I think it's great if you're able to stretch out on your couch or on your bed and go through this kind of protocol. So I think it can be even better if there's any kind of social awkwardness that people have. You can be more relaxed. So that's like the links at the end of the talk. There's, I think I have a whole website with a bunch of different protocols that you can get going on your phone, and then you can just have it by your bed and do it. And I think it would be really effective. So if you found it effective sitting here now listening to a talk, I think that has more obstacles to being effective than if you're, in just kind of on your own time by yourself. The advantage of doing it, like, doing a protocol like this in person, especially like if you're working clinically one-on-one, is that, like, I know when I work with clients, I can watch the pace of their breathing and remind them to slow down their breathing if they seem to be breathing faster. And sometimes we'll just make a recording of it in session, and so then they'll have it to take home with them. When I was in graduate school, we used audio cassettes. We recorded, so we'd have them bring in an audio cassette and go through the protocol in session, and they would take the cassette home. Very archaic technology. We don't do that anymore. I think with something like meditation and mindfulness meditations, there are, I think, benefits for people doing that collectively, because there's a certain collective group benefits from being a part of that people talk about. I have less experience with that myself, but I think that's more from a meditation perspective. And I think the progressive muscle relaxation comes from a somewhat different, like a different angle, because it comes more from clinical behavior therapy. Does that speak to your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you so much.
Okay. Oh, and the paced breathing. Yes, it's like the first two of these that I did, I talked about paced breathing a lot. So I'm kind of obsessed with it, I think. But so the idea with paced breathing for people who weren't there earlier is that it's very easy to breathe just a little faster than we should, or a lot faster than we should. So what you can do is just time your breathing rate by setting a clock for 30 seconds and just breathe normally and see where you're at. And like average breathing rate is like 10 to 12 breaths per minute. And if in 30 seconds, you're breathing 7 times, you're breathing 14 breaths per minute. And that's high. And what that tends to do is engage your sympathetic nervous system instead of your parasympathetic. And so there's a lot of research looking at getting your breathing rate down to 10 to 12 breaths per minute, or actually lower, as low as 5 or 6 breaths per minute, will engage your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the more calming, emotion regulation, pro-social branch of the autonomic nervous system. And so there's a lot of data linking good parasympathetic nervous system activity with good mood, with lower anxiety, with empathy, pro-social behavior. So we want to engage that. And so pacing our breathing, this controlled study looking at different paces, once you get down to 4 breaths per minute, you lose the benefits, but getting down as low as 5 or 6 breaths per minute can be really beneficial. How do you do this? There's different ways of doing it. There's actually someone last time posted an idea that I've used. But first of all, breathing through your nose slows down your breathing naturally. So if you find that your breathing rate is too high, breathe through your nose. Second, you can count. You know, if you're trying to get your breath rate down to 10 breaths per minute, if you count 3 counts in, 3 counts out, that's where you should get. And you can, if you make it, you know, you'll just slow, as you add counts, you'll slow down your breathing rate further. And if you do that for, I mean, ideally 10 minutes at a time, but even if you don't have 10 minutes, if you can do it 5 minutes at a time, multiple times per day, that should bring your breathing rate down, and it should bring you some more calm. There's apps that can help with this. You can set alarms on your phone to remind you to do it. So it's just a really powerful strategy, and it doesn't require a lot of scripting. It doesn't require buying into any big model. It's just about slowing down your breathing. Was I going to say something else? Does that clarify that? Hopefully that does. I'm sorry if that was repetitive for some people, but it's worth repeating. It's a good thing to keep in mind. I'm always going to advocate for slowing your breathing down. Great. Other questions or thoughts? Oh, the strategy that someone posted last time was imagining like numbers expanding, like, you know, going like getting puffy numbers and puffing out, and then you know, as on the inhale and then on the exhale getting skinny again. That's a great visual for pacing your breathing. Imagining your abdominal cavity expanding as you inhale to fill, right? Because we tend to breathe when we're not thinking about it. We tend to breathe from our chest, and we want to really breathe from our diaphragm to fill it. It's not really about deep breathing, it's about pacing, but if you take more, you know, deep belly breaths, it will help you slow down your breathing. What other things? Let's actually, Penny, are you still here, Penny? Can you go down to the last slide with the resources? I'll just go through those a little bit. Oh yeah, okay, so yeah, the PACE, there's still a PACE breathing link that talks about that from the National Center for PTSD. This positive psychology PMR link has really good PMR links. And then these, I guess they do a lot of mindfulness in California. So I sent you to UCLA and a UCSD. But I gave those, I always, I've been looking on those sites for a long time, particularly the UCLA website. And then these apps, some of them you have to pay for, but there's an app called Breathe, Headspace, probably everyone's heard of, and Calm can help with breathing, meditation. And then also on campus, the programs that Alex and I direct our students, our therapists at UAlbany Psychological Services Center. This is different than Student Psychological Health Center. This is more of a community clinic. We're located downtown on Washington, just by the Northeast Association for the Blind at Albany. We're in the same building. And there, our PhD students provide psychotherapy under our supervision. And we're all telehealth right now. We probably will be through the fall, at least for a while. So that's the phone number, and that's also a great resource. We don't take insurance, but we're low fee. And we have therapists who work with adults, children. So we have a lot of different services. Do couples counseling. So, any other thoughts or questions? Things that people are doing to get through these times that they want to share?
Well, thank you, Dr. Gordis. I truly appreciate your session today. And so I will thank everyone for joining us. I hope you found the session as valuable as I have. And we look forward to seeing you next week on Community Conversations. Thank you and be well.